What is up, guys? Welcome to Loveshack Entertainment, and today I am here with Dustin. We're going to be bringing you something a little bit different, and honestly it's something we're pretty pumped about. So just as a real quick overview, because obviously we've got your attention now, we don't want to lose it. When we started this channel back in 2014, we did it as Loveshack Gaming. That was our first venture into YouTube, and we did some gameplay videos that were more or less bad. The effort behind them was good, they were kind of funny, but the videos themselves were not something that I would be proud to launch with a serious effort. So we kind of got where we're at now based on Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon and other card game videos and things like that. So that is not going away. That is the core of our channel, and you will still be getting uploads of openings and all that. This basically just consider this an extra for those of you that are interested in it. Now, we are entertainment, right? So obviously we try to appeal to all those things, and it gives us a little bit more creative freedom. As far as I'm concerned, more videos is not a bad thing. It's only more content for you. Now, why video games? So there's a lot of people on YouTube that do Let's Plays and video games and stuff like that, and I feel like doing Let's Plays, you really limit yourself because there's just thousands of them, and honestly there's people that do it better than us. So instead of Let's Plays, what we're doing is a review-style series, influenced by some other ideas that we kind of took and created to make it our own thing. We're going to be starting with Life is Strange for the PS4. Did you hand me that? That Life is Strange. See? Life is Strange, the PS4. It is made by Square Enix, the same people that made Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, but it was also partially made by Don't Nod Entertainment. They are a German development company, and it's a relatively low-budget game, from what I understand, but I'm hopeful that it's going to be good. It's got great reviews, and they've done well in the past, so I don't know how they could do that here. Square Enix has generally put out good games. So, Life is Strange. Now, here's the catch. We have not played this game. We haven't even installed it yet, actually. We just bought it. We were taking a look at like the instruction book and the stuff that comes with limited edition, but other than that, we haven't done anything. I don't know what it's about. I assume it's about pictures in some capacity, based on the cover. But we are going to go ahead and play Life is Strange. So we're going to play it together. We're going to stream it too, so we'll be doing some streaming on Twitch and YouTube and stuff. You guys can watch along with us if you want to. We're going to be doing that to collect footage so that we can actually put this video together. It's going to be broken down into 3 parts. It's going to be plot, it's going to be presentation, and it's going to be gameplay. We're going to give individual opinions on it, so we're going to try our best to keep our thoughts to a minimum during the game. That's not to say that we may not react here and there. Who knows what's going to happen? But the fact is that we're going to try to keep it, not even talking to each other off camera. We're going to try to do this so that when we sit down and we film, you get our individual perspectives on the game. So we're going to give you the story. We're going to give you some clips of the story, which you're going to see shortly. That's where we're going to start here. And then we'll talk about the gameplay and what it's like to play. And then we'll talk about how it's presented and just kind of wrap it up together. And we're going to do this hopefully once a month, maybe twice, depending on how it goes getting forward. But we would really like to get some feedback on it from you guys, so I hope you enjoy, and I hope we enjoy too, because we're all going to be playing this kind of together. You're going to be seeing through our eyes, but it's going to be our first time playing. So, without further ado, I present to you our first venture into gaming, and I present to you Loveshack Reviews.
Right there in the actual video part?
Yes.
What's happening?
I don't know. Our story opens with a tornado. And that's it. It's the whole story. The town dies, the game ends. No, I'm just kidding. So the story opens with a tornado with the main character, Max Caulfield, in a situation where she looks like she's about to die. The tornado's about to destroy her homeland. She has no idea what's going on, and then boom! All of a sudden it's a dream. She wakes up, she's in class. She's in the class of her professor, Mark Jefferson, who is a famous photographer who has now come to Blackwell Academy, her new school, to teach a photography class. So Max has transferred there from Seattle, where she used to live, and she's taking a class there, and she's going to school there because she wants to, be an expert in photography. She's got a scholarship and all that stuff. So that groundwork is set pretty early on. We also learned she's a little bit of a hipster. She likes taking selfies, and she doesn't really fit in, per se, with most of the other kids in the class. So after she wakes up from her dream sequence, we go through a little bit where she gets asked a question, she's kind of dozed out of it, she gets it wrong, they laugh at her, and she leaves the room for a few minutes to go to the bathroom to wash her face, which for some reason seems to be a common theme in this game because you see characters wash their face in the bathroom sink frequently. I don't know if that's just something they do in Oregon or if they just practice good hygiene. Either one. Doesn't matter to me. As she's in the bathroom, completing her face-washing ritual, a rich, snobby little boy who we learn to be Nathan Prescott, the the rich kid at the school whose parents basically own the town by virtue of the fact that they have a lot of money, and people are easily bribed in this world, and ours as well. Nathan comes in with a gun and he's freaking out, and then another girl comes in shortly after, and they get into a little bit of a scuffle over what appears to be drug-related things. Nathan freaks out, he shoots her, the girl dies, and Max just has a moment where she's like, whoa, what the fuck is going on? So she learns that she has the ability to rewind time. She zooms back in time before Nathan shoots the girl and elects to, after kind of coming to terms with the fact that she's like some kind of grand wizard, smash the fire alarm and send the fire alarm so everyone goes panicking. Nathan runs out of the bathroom, the girl never gets shot, blah blah blah. So we get out of the bathroom, she talks to the principal about the fact that Nathan had a firearm, but the principal doesn't believe her because Nathan's rich, his family owns a school, blah blah blah. So there's a bunch of pointless exposition basically after this, where you go around and meet a bunch of characters that are irrelevant and hardly ever show up again and matter in no capacity. You go outside the school and you're going to meet Warren, who is Max's really only friend at the school, and he has a crush on her, and you're going to meet him in the parking lot because he's got a flash drive that belongs to her that she needs back for a project. Along the way, you see a few more students. You walk through the gardens, the quad as they call it. You see this beautiful, beautiful self-portrait of Dustin that somehow they included in the game. I don't know. It's beautiful. Marvelous. Look at that. Look at that face. Look at it. Face only a mother could love. And then after you go through this wonderful world of self-portraiture, you go to the parking lot with Warren, where you talk to him a little bit. He tries to hit on you, asks you to go to the movies, and again, none of it matters. Nothing. No, it's irrelevant. It means nothing in the context of the story. And then Nathan comes up, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm Nathan, I'm rich. He starts starting all sorts of shit. He tries to go after Max, threatens her because she threatened him. Warren intervenes, and Max gets saved by the girl who she saved in the bathroom earlier, who turns out to be her best friend Chloe that she knew as a child, and then when she moved to Seattle, they stopped talking for whatever, so 5 years have passed, they come back, they reconnect. Turns out Chloe had gotten into a bit of a scuffle with Nathan over drugs because she was trying to get money from him to help fund a way for her to leave the city and go somewhere because she's a little bit fucked up in the head. So you go back to Chloe's house, you talk, they apologize, they kiss and make up and whatnot, and then that doesn't actually happen in that context, but so basically she's home. You find out her stepdad is like this military guy who's kind of an asshole, but her mom is a good person, and her dad died in a car accident when she was younger. And so you're in the room. Chloe decides to medicate, as they call it, because apparently just smoking a doobie is a little bit too PC for the game to mention. She starts smoking. The stepdad comes in. He's like, hey, you been smoking that weed, the devil's lettuce? And Chloe's like, nah. And so you basically have to make your first big decision in the game about whether or not you want to intervene. Regardless of whether or not you choose to intervene or not, you and Chloe end up leaving, and you go to this park, whatever. I don't know. It's just a park that you see in the beginning of the game, actually. While you're there, you zone out a little bit in the park, and then you have another vision of the tornado. You come to, and Chloe's like, what the hell's going on? And you tell her that you think you have time travel powers, and she looks at you like, bruh, what? You're crazy. And eventually, you explain to her that you did use your time travel powers to stop her from dying in the bathroom earlier. She kind of believes you a little, but she's a little skeptical. And then all of a sudden, it just starts to snow on an 80-degree sunny day in the middle of summer. And Chloe's like, well, this is a bit weird. Maybe there is some truth to what you're saying. They blame it on climate change. It turns out the game is just a propaganda tool for Al Gore. And then we basically revolve the chapter there with a preview for the next chapter that promises to make things a little bit more interesting.
It starts off with Max learning more about Kate, a character mentioned in chapter 1, but not really expanded upon until this current chapter. Max talks to Kate and learns that she had gone to a party previous to Max arriving at the school, where she was possibly drugged, and she can't remember what happens except arriving at the hospital. After this, Max gets a text from Chloe asking her to meet her at the Two Whales Diner, the diner that Chloe's mother, Joyce, works at. At the diner, Chloe wants to know more about Max's power, so she kind of has her prove that this is a real thing by making Max predict what's going to happen in the next coming minutes or so. This sets off a little kind of puzzle where you have to watch what happens in the diner. Someone dropping a coffee mug, the little cockroach that you can barely see crawling into the jukebox. It's kind of a pain in the ass. Once you pass Chloe's little test, she kind of believes you, but she still wants to prove even more that you actually have these rewind powers. So you and Chloe go to the nearby junkyard where Chloe likes to hang out. At the junkyard, Chloe makes you find 5 bottles so she can start shooting them with her stepdad's gun that she stole from him. After you find these bottles, Chloe wants to shoot them so she can test out your newfound powers even more. If you do things wrong, she ends up shooting herself and whatnot. It's another puzzle where you have to find the right things and do the right stuff in the right order. Again, can be a little bit of a pain in the ass and, is considered the gameplay of the game. After you complete this exercise, Frank, the local drug dealer, shows up asking Chloe to give him any money he found. This ends up making you take a choice. As Frank pulls a knife on you, you can either choose to shoot him or not shoot him. The only difference that ends up happening is Frank either takes your gun or he doesn't. Because if you shoot him, you find the gun actually has no ammo, and he just gets mad at you and threatens you. And the other choice is you don't shoot him, and he kind of just takes your gun because he thinks you're a little bitch. Once Frank leaves, Chloe and Max decide to do the smartest thing ever, and that's to actually walk on the train tracks and lie down on the train tracks. Once Max and Chloe try to get up, Chloe finds that her foot actually gets stuck in the train track. And again, it makes you complete a little bit of a puzzle to free her. This makes you do things like break into the nearby building so you can cut the wires of the train track and be able to actually set the train in a different track so it doesn't end up crushing her and she can get free. This is one of the more dramatic parts of the chapter, and I almost killed Chloe and she almost got hit by a train. I saved her though. After you free Chloe from the train tracks, Max actually has to go back to school because she has class. About halfway through the class, a student actually comes in and tells everyone that there's someone trying to commit suicide and jumping off one of the buildings at the girls' dorm. Once you actually arrive there, you find out that it's Kate, who is the girl who's getting bullied and had the video taken of her at the party. Max tries to save her and realizes that her powers can actually stop time, at least in this case, because I don't think she ever does it again in the game. So she stops time to get up to the roof to try to talk Kate down. Once you're up there, you can either say the right things to convince Kate to come down and save herself, or she ends up jumping off the roof and killing herself. In our case, we actually ended up saving her. She came down, and then you go to the principal's office. Once at the principal's office, the principal asks you, who was more responsible for Kate trying to commit suicide? Was it Mr. Jefferson because he's been bullying her? Kind of, a little bit. Not really. Is it David Madsen, who you earlier find in the game is kind of harassing her? Or was it Nathan, who it seemed to be more Nathan, because that's who seemed to have drugged her. And that's how the chapter ends, You end up seeing a scene with, Warren with his arm around Max and a bunch of other things, and then it gives you a preview of the next chapter.
Chapter 3 kicks us off with Chloe and Max deciding that they are going to break into the school because they suspect Principal Wells of being a bit sneaky, shady, influenced by the Prescott family. They decide they're going to sneak into the school using Max's time travel powers, find out what they can, what he has, what he's hiding, as well as find out information about Rachel Amber, the missing girl that we told you about in Chapter 2. And should have probably mentioned in Chapter 1, but didn't. And that's beside the point. So, Chloe wants to find out what happened to Rachel. Obviously, Max is intrigued by it too. She was beloved by everybody at the school. That's just what happens. So they go into the school. They start sneaking around a little bit. No one's in there, but they have to, make a bomb from scratch so that they can blow the door open, which I'm fairly certain would be suspicious in any other setting and or scenario. But here, it's commonplace. We have bomb constructors all over the place. And so they break their way into the office, they go in, they find out all these clues that include evidence of Nathan Prescott and Rachel having been together before, or at least involved in something. David Madsen, the security guard, who is also Chloe's stepfather, also had some involvement with Rachel and Nathan and all them, and he had been tracking them. And they start to plant the seeds at this point that David may not be such a bad guy, but there's still some questions as far as what's going on with him entirely. After that, they get their information, they leave, and they go to the pool, because after you break into a multi-million-dollar private school estate and manage to get out unnoticed, the best idea is absolutely to break back in and go swimming where you're going to make a bunch of noise. So that's a great plan. And naturally, as you would expect, as they're in the pool and they talk and they exposition the shit out of everybody, David Madsen ends up coming in to the locker room. He knows there's somebody there, but he's not sure who. You have to avoid him in a little bit of gameplay. And then you basically leave the school and you go back to Chloe's house for the night, because obviously you can't stay at Blackwell because it's late. You're supposed to be in your dorms hours ago, whatever. So they spend the night at Chloe's house, they wake up, and they decide the next day that they're going to investigate Frank, who is the drug dealer, who is responsible for Chloe's debt. And what they're going to do is they're going to break into his RV and see what information they can find out as far as who he's been selling drugs to, what the association may have been between him and Nathan, blah, 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 all that. So they go to the diner, they use their time travel power magic that Max has to get Frank's keys, they go into his RV, and they find out all this stuff that Frank and Rachel, the missing girl, actually had a relationship at one point. It's unknown how it ended or why, but obviously Rachel disappearing may have played a part in that. And so they find this information. Max tells it to Chloe, but she doesn't really believe it because she didn't think Rachel was actually into Frank. And so there's this little bit of argument there, and Chloe just kind of has like one of these like breakdown like moments where she talks about the fact that like her life kind of sucks, like her dad had died in a car crash, she kind of blames her dad for leaving, blah blah blah, and she obviously doesn't like her stepfather. Max tries to rectify the situation by talking to her, but it doesn't work, and then we end up going to a point where Max looks at a picture of her and Chloe when they were younger, about 5 years in the past. And she discovers that by looking at this picture, she actually has the ability to travel back in time to the moment where that picture took place. So she goes back to her childhood where her and Chloe are still friends, and they're both still living in Arcadia Bay before Chloe's father passes away, and she decides that she's going to break every trope of time travel movies, TV, and lore ever, and prevent her dad from dying to make everything perfect again in the future. Naturally, as you would expect, the dad doesn't die, but everything gets all sorts of fucked up. Chloe ends up getting in a fight with her stepfather and her mom. She storms off. Max is left alone. When she does go back in time, she takes the keys. The actual dad doesn't die, but what happens is when she returns back to the present time, it turns out that Chloe instead got in the car accident, and she is now paralyzed permanently in a wheelchair and getting closer and closer to dying every day. So aside from this like mind fuck of depression and like poor decision making, you go for a walk with Chloe in her wheelchair. She talks to you. She guilt trips you. She says you basically abandoned her and all this stuff.
It's chapter 4.
Is that chapter 4? Is it?
Yep.
Are you sure?
Yes.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. It is. So basically, you find out when you go back in time that everything is all fucked up. You return to the present time, but Chloe's in a wheelchair, and the chapter decides to just leave you on this cliffhanger of Chloe just being there in a wheelchair, sitting there like looking all blind-eyed and shit, or wide-eyed rather, looking all wide-eyed and shit. And she's sitting there, and then the chapter just abruptly ends. Now, those of you who are emotional may have experienced some sort of mental breakdown at this moment, but this is where it leaves you with a chapter preview of Max at a party, and that is all that it says, so basically, it's a big fuck you, and you have to wait and see what happens in Chapter 4.
Chapter 4 begins with Max trying to settle into her new life with Chloe in her wheelchair. In this timeline, this is the first time that Max reconnects with Chloe, so Chloe and Max kind of have to do this whole catching up, even though Max had already caught up with Chloe in another timeline. It gives you a pretty uncomfortable feeling, and it's kind of creepy almost. This happens for about half an hour or so, 45 minutes, and then towards the end of this whole catching up with Max and Chloe actually asks Max to end her life by giving her extra morphine. Creates a choice for you. You can either say no and not give it to her, or you can kill her. But with both choices, you end up going back in time anyways and deciding you have to actually kill Chloe's dad by letting him go out and get into the car accident. Once Max actually does that, she goes back to her regular timeline and everything seems to be back to normal. At this point, Max and Chloe decide they actually have to go talk to Frank to find any of the missing pieces about Rachel Amber's disappearance. At first, Frank is pretty not too happy about giving away his client list, but after some persuasion and a bunch of rewinds, you eventually get there without shooting him. Eventually, Frank does give you the client list, and you go back to Chloe's house to put all the pieces together. This is when the entire mystery starts to come together. By matching Frank's client list with numbers and all sorts of text, you find out that there's a dark room somewhere hidden in a barn way out on the outskirts of town. Once you get to this barn, you find that it's kind of just a regular barn, and you end up finding a trap door underneath. Once you get in there, you gotta find a code, which is actually hidden in... Once you uncover this hidden room, you find that there's a keypad that you have to find a certain code from. When you were putting all the pieces together, there was a code that was circled with 3 numbers. A bunch of numbers on one of Nathan's clues that was actually the code to get into this dark room. To actually get into the dark room, you find that there's a cabinet full of folders with people's names on it. There's one for Kate, and there's one for Rachel Amber. Once you open this folder, you see pictures of Rachel Amber. She's all drugged up, and there's just kind of creepy pictures of her. And at this point, Chloe becomes enraged and goes to the end of the world party where she thinks she'll find Nathan. Once you actually get there, you find that Nathan's not actually at the party, and you receive a text from him saying that he's going to uncover Rachel's body and move it somewhere else. At this point, Chloe decides she has to rush to get there so she can prove that Nathan is guilty before he moves the body. Max and Chloe arrive. They find that Nathan's not there and the body's still there. Once Max and Chloe arrive at the actual gravesite, they end up getting ambushed from an unknown person behind them. Max gets drugged, and although she tries to rewind time, she finds that she can't. Possibly due to the drugs, although it's never really explained why she can't. And Chloe ends up getting shot in the head. You don't see the person's face when the needle actually goes into Max's neck, but once after Chloe gets shot in the head, you realize that it's Mr. Jefferson this whole time, and it wasn't Nathan. This is pretty much where the chapter ends and leaves you with the final cliffhanger for the final chapter of the game.
Chapter 5, which is arguably the best chapter in the game. Maybe 4 is good, but 5 really kind of brings everything together and kind of just brings, obviously, a resolution to everything. So at the start of Chapter 5, you find out that you've been drugged. Well, Max has been drugged. And she is in the dark room that they explored earlier in the game. And she is the prisoner of none other than Mark Jefferson, who is the professor at the school, and the one that you see actually drugged her and killed Chloe at the very end of the game. So she's taped in a chair.
Very end of Chapter 4.
Very end of Chapter 4, Jefferson's revealed to be the one who drugs her and everything else. And so he explains that Nathan is a pawn, basically, and that he used Nathan for his money because he was easily influenced, and Jefferson got these things to finance his room, where he basically kidnaps these girls, drugs them, and takes these creepy, weird, like, pictures of them.
Like fetish pictures,
like
almost. I don't
understand it. Like they're all duct taped up. He says he wants to quote expose their innocence, and then he actually admits that he was the one who had kidnapped Rachel Amber, and then they had drugged her and taken pictures. And I guess Nathan went a little overboard and overdosed her, and she ended up dying as a result. So you see that Nathan killed her and that they buried her in the junkyard, which is why the pictures in those binders are of Rachel. So you find out Rachel's dead. Max finds a way to kind of get out of the situation that she's in by rewinding time using a picture that she's able to kind of push towards herself, because when Jefferson kidnaps her, her diary and stuff had been on her, so there was a picture. She goes back in time, she talks to David, who she then reports the situation to via text. So David now finds out that Jefferson's the one responsible, and then as they forward back in time again, she is able to, I believe initially she goes back in time and she's not trapped anymore, right? And she goes back to where Chloe is.
She initially goes back, and she's not trapped anymore. She tells David about Jefferson.
Right.
And then she wins the contest.
And then she goes to San Francisco, but she finds out that Chloe's still dead, right?
Chloe is not
She's
still
not
dead.
Dead?
I don't know. I don't think so.
No, she definitely has to be.
No, because Chloe texts her from the beach.
That's right.
Tornado's still coming.
That's right. So Chloe's alive. Chloe's trapped on the beach. The tornado's still coming. Max realizes that everything isn't as hunky-dory as she thought it was going to be. So she elects to go back in time again, but when she does it this time, she ends up back in Jefferson's room, and he has actually burned her diary because he was annoyed or pissed off or whatever. She doesn't have a picture to go back in time with anymore. So now, Chloe's still dead. She's trapped with no way to travel back in time, and Jefferson says he's going to kill her because she knows too much. So after he's done taking pictures, he's going to kill her, which leads to David coming in. David, who had gotten the text, and he comes in, and you have to play a little bit of a sequence where you help David to fight Mr. Jefferson. David ends up taking him down, tying him up, whatever, and then David frees you. You explain to him what happened, and then Jefferson gets taken to prison. However, Chloe's still dead. So you still have to go back in time and rectify the situation because the tornado's still going to come, Chloe's still dead. So you go back in time again to before you go to the party, you talk to Chloe, you explain everything to her. You also explain to her that Rachel's dead, and she kind of has like a little bit of a freak moment, right? Because Rachel's still dead in that timeline. You explain that Jefferson's the one who killed her. And then you tell Chloe that you have to go forward again and let things play out, but that she has to fill in Max from that timeline as to what's going on, because she's obviously not going to know. So everything gets down to the end. Jefferson has been stopped still, and then it comes down to Max and Chloe, and the tornado is still happening. In this scenario here, you go to the diner where Joyce is with Frank, and you talk to Frank about what happened with Rachel. Warren's there. She tells Warren about her powers. She ends up kissing him. And then she says she has to go back in time again to stop Chloe from dying, and then come back to the final thing. So this is supposed to be like the final time travel sequence. However, when she does this, she finds that time has been kind of distorted. There's a really weird scene where you get chased by all these characters, and all these moments you've seen from the game kind of come together and make this weird nightmare sequence. It's really trippy, especially if you're on acid when you play it like we were. And I'm just kidding about that, by the way. We weren't on acid. I was. You won't. Well, part of life.
You
I guess.
didn't know.
No, I had no idea. So anyway, you get to the end of the game, and you go back in time, and basically everything happens, all the bullshit happens, and the very end of the game is you and Chloe. You're standing on top of the tower where the lighthouse is, where you've seen in a few different sequences in the game where you see the premonition of the tornado. You come to the realization that no matter what you do, the tornado is still going to happen as long as Chloe is alive. Max realizes that in order to stop the tornado, she has to go back in time to before she saves Chloe from being shot by Nathan and let her die. Of course, the other option would be to just let the town die and let the thousands of people living in the town die. So it puts this huge burden on you as the player as, well, which choice are you going to make? And Chloe accepts the fact that this is what's best. She tells Max to go back and do it. She says she had a great week, and you really build sympathy for the Chloe character. Now, in our game, we elected to go with the route of letting the town die, because we're just terrible, terrible people. But in reality, you spend so much of this game trying to save Chloe, and the whole game is based around the character development between you and Chloe, that it almost feels like if you don't let go of the option of saving her, that everything you did was completely pointless. 13 hours of gameplay, completely pointless.
I agree. This is really the only choice that directly affects the end of the game.
Yeah, I mean, more or less, because there's two different endings, and you make that choice, and in our footage, we really couldn't decide super well, but we ended up saving, and then what happens is we happen to check out the other ending, because some people are obviously going to be curious.
We don't have footage of that, we'll get it.
I don't have footage of that, however, we are going to put up a little bit of a, we're gonna broadcast everything that we played, all of our gameplay, now that this video is kind of wrapped up. So there'll be a separate series of videos where you can just watch the whole game from start to finish with us playing, and we'll toss up the alternate ending so you guys can basically get a full grasp of what happened with the game itself. But in that ending, Chloe, you go back, you let her die, everything kind of unfolds, Jefferson still gets captured, everything happens, you go to the funeral for Chloe, and it's a lot more sad, and either way the game ends, you don't really feel satisfied.
No, there's no satisfying.
There is no happy ending.
No
this
happy
is
ending.
not like an Asian massage parlor. It's more so like,
it's either you did everything and all of it was pointless, or everyone dies.
Right. This game does not end with the sense of happiness that you get the vibe that this hot dog is feeling from this bottle of mustard right here. You know what I'm saying? You see that? You see that right there? That is a happy hot dog. But the key point of all this is that the game kind of wraps up with the one choice that matters, and that choice directly influences the outcome of the game. Now, they did say that there's a sequel, of course, but I don't think it's going to have any of those same characters, so it's
maybe
kind of
a cameo or
maybe,
something,
but I'm not going to get my hopes up, because I do feel like this story had so much to it that really just wasn't answered. Things that could have been explained a little bit better and weren't, but I guess that's just par for the course. What happens when you're a low-budget German development company? So the game ends either one way or another, still kind of sad. Either you let thousands of people die, or you just wasted 13 hours. No matter which way you look at it, there's really no positive way to end it. But the game in and of itself, we've got plenty of thoughts coming up on that. So we're gonna
be individual thoughts.
We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna sit down. We're gonna talk about it. We've again tried to refrain from saying too much, but I think we're both in agreement that the game was good, right? I mean, we're both in agreement that the game itself was good. So we'll expand upon that further, and we'll do that right about now. Game is presented in a way that is just very different from a lot of games I've played, at least recently. But of course, that could just be my lack of experience with games of this genre. The graphics are awesome, but in their own way. So we mentioned in the story part of the video that Don't Nod Entertainment was the one who designed the game, and they're a German developer or whatever it was, so they had a lower budget when they were working on it. You can kind of see that reflected in the actual visuals of the game, because the lips don't move all the time, they don't sync up well, and some of it looks almost like an oil pastel style effect. But for the most part, I just think it looks really cool, and in the sense that it kind of captures its own world and the imagination of the world that it's in with its own art style. So it probably could be done better if there was like a higher budget studio that was going to be putting it together. But for the context of what it presented, I think it worked really well. The things that I thought was really interesting was just like subtle things, whether it were in the background or just hints sort of thing, like things that weren't inherently hints, but things that kind of gave you an idea of what was going on, and the way that was presented to you and kind of made you want to check everything. So, one of those games where you walk through, you want to read every poster, check every door, check every hallway, and it makes it a little bit longer to play, but at the same time, it keeps you engaged because it just puts these little things, and there's even some elements that I learned about after finishing the game that we didn't even notice during it, that had hints, secrets, things like that. So I think as far as what they did to kind of present it to you in that way was actually really cool. You have to make these choices. You're presented with these decisions about saving people and decisions that are going to influence the game later. And a lot of games like Undertale and some other games like that do present that element of your actions will have consequences. I thought this game did it well. I don't think it was like really, there's only 2 possible endings, so it's not as though your actions have anything significant other than, the final decision. But it does create the illusion that, your story could change and that you want to make sure you make the right decision. So I think that was done well. I think the characters were done really well, and I really enjoyed the landscapes, like the settings and stuff, even, like I said, in its own art style.
The presentation, the game does have an odd look to it. It's very cartoony. It kind of almost like Borderlands, but not as cell shaded. A personal gripe I have with it is sometimes the lip syncing can be a little bit off, and it's a personal opinion I have with a personal gripe I kind of have with the game is that sometimes the lip syncing can be a little bit off. This can be really distracting when you're trying to actually get involved and you want to be put into the game and you really can't because the people's lips don't match up with their words. Another thing is a lot of times people's facial expressions don't really change. They're very just the music in the game really it fits the mood really well. We can't play any on the channel because most of it is copyrighted. It's made by musicians independently, but it's really good. It fits the mood, and I think it really adds to the game. The way the game makes you feel about the characters, has you have certain attachments and emotions towards the characters is really cool. Not many games have the ability to do this. I can only name a couple off the top of my head. Games like The Last of Us. Any story-based game does it, and this one does it really well. And it was good to see that in an indie game like this. In terms of gameplay, the game doesn't offer too much. It's kind of heavy rain-ish. You make decisions and you talk to people and hit certain buttons, but in terms of gameplay, there's really not much you can do. Obviously, you control the character, you walk around very limited areas. Really cool to talk to some of the characters, and you can, a lot of what you say doesn't actually make a huge difference, but other things they have some sort of bearing on the rest of the game, whereas the other things don't. The only choice that really matters in the game is the only choice that makes a major difference in the story of the game is actually only the last choice you make. It gives you a different ending, and personally, I don't like that much. I feel like the game should change majorly on all the other choices you make. I understand that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do when making a game, but it still would have been nice to see and have that kind of effort put into the game.
Gameplay. Gameplay's a little bit different because with a game like this, there's just such a minimal element of gameplay involved. You get to walk around and do some fetch quests and stuff, but the guidelines are pretty much set out for you, even to the point where in certain parts of the game that you can't even do something. Like, you can't leave an area until you've done something else. So it's not really open world in that sense, there's a lot of things you can explore, but there's nothing you can really do that the game doesn't want you to do, or doesn't at least enable, that you have to do to further the story. So it's relatively simple. I mean, you press buttons, you follow along with stories, and like I said, there are a few fetch quests where you have to either go get certain items, or you got to do something and then rewind if you fuck it up and go back and fix it. But it doesn't really. There's not much to it in that respect. As far as the gameplay itself is concerned, I think what, more than anything else, really kind of draws you into the game and makes you want to play, makes you want to get into it, is you almost find yourself in the position of those characters in that game. So you are Max, you're playing as Max. So even though you're technically only pressing a couple of buttons, you're really engrossed in the story, and it makes your decisions matter. So as you're playing the game, it's not giving you much. It's not like Fallout or, I'd just say like Halo or something where it's a shooter where you're going around and everything is reliant on how well you are with the controls and how well you do with that. It's relatively straightforward gameplay. But at the same time, there are elements of it that just, get you engaged. You got to make sure you check everything and read everything and figure out how to do things. And there's a few that are like learn from your mistakes and figure out what you did or didn't do and go back and do it differently. So, I mean, the gameplay is not the best part of this game. This is not the selling point, is not to sit down and play. The selling point is the story and the emotional investment, I think. But, as far as the gameplay goes, it was good for what it was, but once you play about 10 minutes of the game, you know what you're getting into with it. So I don't think there's too much to it, but it's good for what it brings to the table, and it was really just kind of complemented the rest of the game as a whole. So yeah, basically, in summary, after we've given you our opinions on things, I think the story was good. The presentation was definitely up there, and the gameplay, I think we both kind of agreed is,
it's there.
It is what it is. It's a necessary element to the game. Certainly one of those games that if you are bad at suspense and bad at waiting for things
like
can be brutal. I am not great at it. I must admit there were a few periods where I was tempted to look up spoilers, but I didn't. I was better than that. But
if you're looking for a game where that's just purely gameplay, not the game for you.
No, more like Minesweeper or something along those lines,
A Call of Duty.
Call of Duty's good. I love the kids on Call of Duty too. But I mean, as a whole, the characters were awesome. I think we can both agree on that. David Madsen was pretty sweet.
My favorite character.
My favorite character. Him and I liked Frank as well. I thought Frank was pretty cool. So it's definitely one of those games that I would love. There is a sequel. Life is Strange 2 is coming out in January of 2017.
Season 2, right?
It's season 2, but it's not going to feature the same characters. So unfortunately, despite the fact that the story never really had a concrete resolution, because regardless of which ending you chose, there's still unanswered questions. What is with Chloe? Does she link to the tornado, or is it completely separate? I've seen theories that Max and Rachel may actually be the same person in different timelines. There's tons of stuff out there, and it's interesting because the lore of the game is cool. Similar to Five Nights at Freddy's, where a lot of people may read into it a little bit more than you should, which I think is part of the appeal of the game, because you can have discussions about it. But I liked it. I had a lot of fun playing it. It was certainly strenuous emotionally, but I do recommend the game to anybody that has the time to sit down and play it. It's about 13 hours or so, all things considered, if you play it straight through. And it's a lot of fun. It's a good game. It's a good story. And it's unfortunate, like I said, that the sequel's not going to be that. But
did you give it a final rating?
If I had to give it a final rating, I would say I give the story somewhere around an 8 out of 10. I give the presentation somewhere around... I give the presentation as pretty much as high a mark as you can give it, and I say that because even though the graphics weren't perfect, everything worked within the context of the game, and I think it was done well, it was presented well. So a 9 out of 10 on presentation. I mean, gameplay is almost non-existent. You can't really grade it. It is what, I guess, if your game basis is whether or not you can push triangle, circle, X, and square and have it actually work, then sure, the gameplay was what it was. But it was fun. I had a lot of fun playing, had a lot of fun streaming with people, and as we played and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I had a good time. I liked it. I liked it a lot. And, did you happen to have any closing thoughts? Anything you would like to add as we wrap up this chapter of Life is Strange? No pun intended, of course.
Not that I can think of, no.
Take a selfie for the road.
Take one.
Take a selfie for the road. Smile. Selfie for the road. Alright, well, that'll about wrap up this edition of Loveshack Reviews. I do hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you to those of you who gave it a look, even if you are not a huge fan of video gaming or whatever, if you came here for Yu-Gi-Oh! We put a lot of work into this, and I really had fun doing it. But yeah, so if you'll excuse me, I gotta go water my garden.
I'll join you.
All right.